Okay, this video is going to be about a couple of interesting topics. Well, I'm going to make two videos, I think. First of all, my dumb ass, my last couple of videos, I noticed they don't have sound. What happened was, I was playing an online game on my PC for once. I don't PC game much the other day. And I noticed a little mic icon was showing up, and I realized, hey, I've got this mic here. Apparently it's on and it's showing up in the game, so I'm sitting there playing the game, I'm like, fuck, or whatever, cussing, or whatever I may be doing. Maybe other players can hear it, I don't know. I was actually playing the Destiny 2 beta, but anyways, so I just reached over and turned it off, because I didn't want anybody to be, I don't know how all that works in the game, but maybe they were hearing me, in the game, whatever. So I reached, and on my mic I've got a little button on the bottom, turn it off or on. I turned the button off, and I completely forgot about it. So the next couple of videos I made, I didn't have audio, and I never realized it. I uploaded them, and then I checked them a few days later, and the first one, it didn't have audio, and I thought, well, maybe I got some kind of copyright strike, because for that one, I had been kind of watching parts of a Jax Frags video, who's a big YouTuber, as I commented or whatever. So I thought, well, maybe I'm not real experienced with YouTube, and I know that they have these copyright flags and whatnot. So I thought, well, maybe that got copyright flagged and the audio track got blocked. I've seen that a lot on Twitch and stuff. It'll say, like, portions of this audio track have been muted because of copyright. Like, if somebody's talking on Twitch and they got just a song playing in the background on the radio or something, and that song's copyrighted, Twitch will just mute the whole thing, It's stupid, but, they'll mute the whole video. I mean, they don't mute it while it's playing live. But when it's an archived video, they will mute it. Because of the copyrighted song that may be playing. So I thought, well, Jax Frags, maybe it's copyrighted, and maybe somehow a little bit of the Jax Frags audio got through or whatever, and so I guess my whole video got muted because of that. That's what I assumed happened. No, it was the stupid thing where I turned my mic off. And so I made another long video, and I thought it was actually a pretty good one. The one about why Destiny 2 sucks, I think it was. And that one that one got muted too, because it was the whole problem with I still didn't realize I turned my mic off. So this one I should have it fixed, and I turned my mic back on. Anyways. What I wanted to talk about was, I've seen some interesting topics lately, and some very interesting stuff that I just wanted to talk about, and it was in the sports world, and it was this morning. I was listening to the Bill Simmons podcast, actually, today, and he was talking about, he just mentioned this in passing, it wasn't the topic of the podcast or anything, but about how the NBA is kind of seemingly take over an interest in, he was talking about some website owners or something, and, Heather mentioned that, like, they can put up any kind of NBA stories and, they'll all get big traffic. NBA is like a 12-month-a-year league now. You can put up a story about Kyrie Irving now, and, it'll get a bunch of traffic, more than, like, NFL stories and stuff. Apparently, relatively. And he was just talking about how kind of the NBA, and like I said, it wasn't the topic of the podcast or anything. It was just something he mentioned real quick in passing. But it's just like the NBA seems to really be flourishing right now, and the NFL is not. And he mentioned, like, Aaron Donald is, I don't even know who that is, or Aaron McDonald or something, is some defensive player in the NFL, and he's holding out, and he said nobody cares, but, like, if Kawhi Leonard, a great defensive player in the NBA, was holding out, it'd be big news, and everybody would be talking about it. He mentioned this is a point of how the NBA is stronger than the NFL in some ways. And, well, I already had some conceived thoughts on that have kind of crystallized over the years, and here's why I think, and this is very complicated. The thing about the NFL, and really all sports except the NBA, I believe, and this is gonna, like, shock and annoy people, but it's a crazy statement, but it's true. The more you think about it, and the longer you live, and the more the longer you go, you'll start to realize that if you're perceptive, I think it's this. And this is a shocker statement. Talent does not matter in the NFL. And why do I say that? Well, years ago I used to watch the Cowboys, right? And they were dominant. You know, they had this great offensive line. They had Emmitt Smith, Troy Aikman. I watched during that era. I was young, but I watched. And I loved them. I've always been a Cowboy fan, right? And it was great. Well, one year we changed offensive coordinators. We changed head coaches, but we changed offensive coordinators. And we went from Norv Turner as offensive coordinator to Ernie Zampese. And right away, I noticed a change. We couldn't run the ball anymore. We just something was off. We just weren't there anymore. It was just so different. We could not run the ball. We didn't. And somehow in that year, I became convinced that the reason was not the talent, because all the players were the same. This was about 96. It was about 93. It was after the first two Super Bowls. And then we won the third Super Bowl. We didn't really deserve to win that one. And we didn't look good in that game. It was totally different than the first two Super Bowls where we dominated. That game was more like, whoa, we were lucky to win. You know, the third Super Bowl in 95. So I became convinced that the real reason the Cowboys, and then after that we just plummeted. You know, we got worse and worse. The reason it came into my head that it was Ernie Zampese's play calling that was really the problem. So I developed this theory that was, and not just play calling, but like schemes, things like that. You know, what kind of routes he's drawing up, those things. Commitment to the run, and just common sense. Like, there's a lot of things in the NFL that are such common sense that so many offensive coordinators get wrong. Like, if it's 3rd and 1, run the damn ball. You know, it's the easiest gimme playing football. You run it, you got a 90% chance of making it. So many offensive coordinators try to get cute and pass it, and then they have to punt the ball. And those are huge moments in games. Because, you know, as good as QBs are nowadays, you have to pass on 3rd and 1. You're probably looking at a 50-50 coin flip whether you make it. Whereas you run, you're probably looking at a 90-10 coin flip of making it. But every offensive coordinator wants to get cute and pass on 3rd and 2 or shorter now. They just love it. Very annoying. I'm not saying never pass on 3rd and 2 or less, but to me it's one of the most glaring examples of bad play calling that you can get is when an offensive coordinator passes on 3rd and 2. Anyways, point is, I developed this theory that the offensive coordinator is what really matters in football, and I still believe it to some extent. Because, and I mean, you look at great offensive coordinators seem to really matter a lot. But over time, and I also think defensive coordinators matter, but not as much. My theory kind of is that defense is more reactive and it's less like planning based, and it's more based on like individual talent. So if you're a cornerback, it's your athletic ability, it's how well you can react. It's not so much schemes. I believe schemes do play a part, and I think there are bad defensive coordinators and good ones. Like Matt Patricia for the Patriots is a great one, you know, and this is probably one of the main reasons for their success over the years. They always have a good defense, and what else do they have? They always have Matt Patricia, you know, as the coordinator. I believe Josh, their offensive coordinator in New England, Josh, I forget his name. Josh, I wanted to say McDonald, but it's not McDonald. I forgot his name. He was a head coach for a while. He's young. He's got a punk-looking face. Josh McDaniels. I think he's a great offensive coordinator too, even though he didn't have success on his own. I think he's got a sharp young mind, you know. And I think that's a big reason for their success. So for a while, I went on this theory, and I posted this theory a lot on some message boards I hung out on, and so I became famous for this theory on at least one message board because people thought I was a crackpot and everything. But I firmly believe it was about the offensive coordinator, I thought, for a while. That's what determined winning and losing in the NFL more. But as time went on, I had to give up that my theory may not have been entirely correct, and that it's a combination of things. But I think the key thing that I read recently that kind of changed my thinking, it was basically there's a site that tries to be like sabermetrics for football. I think it's called FootballOutsiders.com, and you know there's sabermetrics in baseball and a lot of other sports, especially the NBA. Well, especially baseball is where it started, but they try to be like kind of sabermetrics for football. And they try to make like look at it in a really advanced, intelligent, rational, reasonable way. But what got me was they said that you can do all these advanced metrics and everything, and you can, feed them and you can come up with a prediction of what each team will do. And if you just went through the line and you picked every team to be 8-8, you'll do just as well, I believe, was their conclusion. So their conclusion was basically that, look, all our analysis kind of doesn't matter. You can do all these advanced stats and all these, this team is best in third down run defense, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't mean a thing. You can predict just as well as this site with all these fancy computer models and statistics and smart guys on their staff. And if you just predict every NFL team goes 8-8, you'll do about as well as they do any given year. And if they were to predict before the season. So that's one of my things is everybody wants to look at things in hindsight and be like, oh, well, it's obvious this team is going to be good because they've got a great offensive line and they've got this and that. And I'm always like, okay, so why couldn't you predict that before the season? To me, it's all talk unless you're in sports, unless your model or whatever has predictive power, unless they can look at a team before the season and go, okay, that's a good team. And you can't do that in the NFL. You think you can, but you can't really. There's been years in the NFL. There was one year, I think it was the Rams, St. Louis Rams. They went from like 4-12 to the Super Bowl in 1 year. What does that tell you? It tells you there's no such thing as talent, basically. It tells you that they had the same roster pretty much and this and that. And they just became dominant in 1 year. So how can you say it's the players? It's not the players. It's a dice roll. That's what it's kind of, I realized. That may seem counterintuitive and it's hard to parse and it's hard to but it seems true. Now, the one team that's had a sustained level of success that doesn't seem random is the Patriots. But maybe it is random, Maybe you do have that one outlier of sustained success. Maybe you should expect that in a statistical distribution, so to speak. So that's what I've kind of, like I said, I don't have really clear thoughts on it, but the NFL is a crapshoot. And I used to argue with these guys on this board, they'd go like, oh, your offensive coordinator is so stupid. And I'd say, look, I bought this football magazine. Like Sports Illustrated Football Preview or something, I don't know. And it would list it rated all the teams it thought were going to be like from 1 to 20 or 1 to 32, is it now? Which one's going to be best? And I went through and I looked at like their top 10 and like every other team, their top 10 had like a losing record. Like whoever they picked probably second or first went like, 6-10. Whoever they picked like fourth went like 7-9. It was just terrible. They don't have any predictive power. Like if you or I were to make a list, right now of who was going to do good in the upcoming NFL season, you'd be surprised how wrong we were. Like we may say, I'm trying to think of, I don't even keep up with the NFL news as much as I used to, so I'm not sure who all's expected. Look at the Cowboys are a good example. I think we went 4-12 2 years ago, was it? Or were we another 8-8 year? I can't even remember. But nobody expected us to be good. And we went 12-4 last year all of a sudden. It's like there's no predicting it. You think you can. Now you look at the Cowboys and you go, oh, they were 12-4. They're going to be good next year. No question about it. They're going to be good. And I hope they are because I'm a Cowboy fan, but I don't think you can predict that. So here's the bottom line. The NFL is not a sport that you can predict. You can flip a coin at the end of the day. It sounds crazy. And we all like to not believe it. We all like to think, and usually we do it in hindsight. Like if this team goes out and be as good this year, we'll be like, everybody expected it. No, we didn't, or if we did, there was another team everybody expected to be good that wasn't, And we don't look at that one and go, oh, look how wrong we were. Look at this game last night, KC versus Chiefs. The Patriots expected to win the Super Bowl. Biggest preseason favorite ever, some people were saying. 19-0, you could get good odds at Vegas, I think. Pretty good odds that the Patriots were going to go 19-0. You could do all these things. Patriots are like this juggernaut, everybody said, and the Chiefs went out and beat them. That's an example of like, nobody knows what the heck's going to happen in the NFL from year to year. You just don't. And, to a shocking degree, like more than you'd think. And like I said, the way to do it would be to try to predict before the season how every team's going to do. And you're going to miss on as many as you're going to hit, You're going to go 50-50 is what's going to happen. So the point of all this long-winded thing is to say that the NFL is random. You don't know who's going to win in a year or not. And the one outlier to that the last 15 years has been the Patriots, but let's just put them aside and say that they're a fluke or an anomaly or something. Other than that, you can't predict. You don't know, So it's just the same as in other sports. In MLB, it's a crapshoot. It's a dice roll. You don't know who's going to win any year. There's no juggernauts. There's not a team you can go, look at, they're amazing. MLB's really bad about it because I think it's just a chancy sport to begin with. I mean, you look at a great record in MLB is 162. That's equivalent to 10-6. It's not a very skill-based sport. Everybody gravitates to 500. There's too much chance involved, And same thing, they were making a big deal in the NHL last year. They said, look at all the parity we've got. The whoever, Tennessee or somebody, I think it was, got to the NHL finals and nobody expected it. The other team, nobody expected. And I was like, yeah, that means you can, look how superior you are to the NBA, because the NBA, everybody is so boring. Everybody knows it's going to be Golden State and Cleveland. And look at our great NHL playoffs where nobody knew who the hell was going to be in the finals. And I'm like, yeah, that's what's wrong with your sport. It's a dice roll. It's a coin flip. You don't know who's going to be in the finals because flip a coin, and that may have its positives in some ways, but I think over the long term, it doesn't. Over the long term, it doesn't engender interest. At the end of the day, people want dominance in their sports. The greatest example to me of this was Mike Tyson. Boxing was never bigger than when Mike Tyson was at his heyday. Why? Because he was so dominant, and everybody just latched on to it, and they went, man, this guy knocks people out in a minute and a half into the first round. And, like I said, boxing was never bigger than when Mike Tyson was at his most dominant. In most cases, and I believe it can get boring, but in most cases, dominance helps a sport, People like to understand who's good and who's bad in a sport. So people may look at it as a negative. Oh, the NBA is so boring because Golden State and Cleveland are just penciled in for the fight. But I bet you in the long run that helps them because you know who the good teams are. You don't know who the good teams are in Major League Baseball. You don't know who the good teams are in NHL. You're flipping coins, You can't predict now who's going to be in the Super Bowl. You have some favorites, but you don't know, you wouldn't bet a lot of money on Seattle or New England being in there, not if you were smart, but you'd bet a lot of money on Golden State being in the NBA finals, So what's my point? All the sports, all team sports, I believe, for the most part. Oh, I was going to mention another dominant guy where his sport really flourished was Tiger Woods. When he was dominant in golf was off the charts in popularity. So my point is dominance, it can stifle interest to an extent, I believe, but for the most part, I think it grows interest, and it always has. People want to see that dominant player, that dominant figure, that everybody's gunning for, that's so good, So that's just a little side analogy. That dominance, I think, it actually helps sports. Because if you have like the NHL where you don't know who's getting to the finals, and it's a coin flip. That's what it is. That's what I always try to point out about it. The NHL, MLB, they're coin flips, Okay, neato, this team got to the finals. Got to the pennant World Series, It doesn't mean anything because it's random chance, mostly, That's what the NBA has going for it, and that's the long-winded point of this video. The NBA is the one sport where talent matters, And why these sports are this way, I don't know, but back to the NFL, there is one thing that I think kind of does seem to influence success. I think it's a very complicated combination of factors. I think talent can play into it a little bit. I think it's coaching, and specifically the coordinators and schemes, more so than the head coach. I think the head coach is mostly a figurehead, unless he calls plays also. I think the important coaching is the play callers on both sides of the ball. But it's the schemes, the play callers, I think those are very big factors, underrated factors. I think it's the quarterbacks, because if you try to look at the NFL and say who's successful, there is one pattern, and that's like the same quarterbacks seem to keep winning Super Bowls. You know, Tom Brady, maybe Aaron Rodgers, although I guess he only has one. Joe Flacco. You know, there was something like out of the AFC in the last 15 years, only 4 quarterbacks went to the Super Bowl, and they all went like multiple times. They were like Roethlisberger went 3 or 4 times. Flacco went a couple times, I think. Brady, you know, about 8 times. And Peyton Manning. You know, those were like the only 4 quarterbacks, I think. I may be missing somebody. But that went to the AFC, or went to the Super Bowl from the AFC in like the last 12 or 15 years. So in trying to find patterns in the NFL, there does seem to me to be a pattern there that a great quarterback seems to sustain success to some extent. So I'm still working on my theories of trying to figure out why NFL teams win and stuff. But I think that it seems clear that a top-notch quarterback does tend to have repeatable success, maybe to some extent. So, but anyway, so you know, I always say talent doesn't matter in the NFL. The one place that I think it may matter a little is quarterback. But the NFL, here's what you gotta understand: like, is there really any difference between all the linebackers? Not to be racist, but they're all black guys who are 6'4", 240 pounds. They all run 4.2. You know, or 4.5 yard, second 40-yard dashes. They're all physical monsters. They're all the same. You know, you can plug anybody in, and there's no difference. That's the thing about the NFL. That's why you see all these running backs, you know, they have about a 3-year career, and then they just plug in another guy. You know, plug in another guy. Look at the Patriots do in that respect. Does it matter if he's playing running back for the Patriots? You know, it really doesn't. That's my point. And when you get to the point where players are replaceable, it means players don't matter. It means talent doesn't matter. And that's the point. That's very true in the NFL. I mean, the average guy in the NFL has a 3-year career. They're all replaceable, faceless cogs, you know. Who's playing left corner for Team X just doesn't matter. People like to make this big deal out of it, but it doesn't. You know, all you're doing is replacing one 6-foot fast guy with another 5'10" fast guy. You know, there's not skill differentiation there. It's not rocket science, you know. Another great place to look at is offensive line. You know, are you really going to try to logically convince me that this 6'7", 360-pound guy is different than this 6'7", 360-pound guy who's his backup, you know? There may be slight differences there, but the point is there's really not, no matter what anybody tells you. There may, you know, like if you try to predict if the Cowboys are going to have a good offensive line before the season or not, you can't, because we supposedly had a great offensive line, and 2 years ago we were 4-12 or whatever it was. What happened to our great offensive line that just guaranteed we were going to win games, you know? It wasn't there that year, and people still said we had a good offensive line, but I don't know why they say that, because you can't really tell from watching games, or there's no stat you can look at. You know, it's all so subjective. That's my point. You know, it's hard for none of us can grade NFL offensive linemen. We don't watch them all the time. You know, there's no objective way to grade them. There's no objective stats they can have. You know, you don't know. You think you do, but you don't. You know. And like I said, there's just no difference between a backup in the NFL and a starter 90% of the time. You know, if you take out one generic 6'4", 350 guard and put in another 6'4", 350 guard, and they both bench press 500 pounds, you know, they're the same basically, you know. People will try and they'll go crazy if you say that. No, this guy's so much better than this guy. Or they'll point out the exaggerated example. Oh, you're saying this Hall of Famer is the same as this crappy, you know, 7th round draft pick. You know, they'll go for the most extreme examples, but they don't realize most of the time it's not that. You know, it's a good player being replaced with another good player, or an average player being replaced with another average player. You know, you can't look at the outliers. And I think it's pretty obvious that, like, where talent matters might be like wide receiver, because there you can get some incredible physical specimens that are tall and fast. Quarterback, because, and I'm not sure what makes quarterbacks great, but you can't just look at the physical with them, but But my point of all this is, why is the NBA so important, or gaining an influence? Because it's a talent-based sport, in my opinion. That's so refreshing. And once you realize it, you start to see it. It's so refreshing to see, like, the players matter. I hate to tell people this, but they don't matter to a large extent in the NFL. They don't. Nobody wants to hear that, and you're crazy, you're a nut, you're a crackpot. But like I said, here's how you can tell. You can just predict every NFL team goes 8-8 every year, and he'll do just as good as the most advanced statistical brain, and the best NFL pickers, and you'll over the long term you'll equal them. You know what I mean? There's no predictive ability in football. Let's start with that premise. And if there's no predictive ability in football, then how can you say that there's such a thing as talent in football? You can't. And, people don't want to hear that. It's sacrilege. It's nuts. You're a crazy person. But to some extent, it's true. It really is. But you look at the NBA. The NBA is the one major sport that I know of where talent really matters. And it's not just because there's only 5 players on a team. It's also just because, I don't know why, but it's just a talent-based sport. The individual dynamics of how it works. You can get differentiation. Like LeBron is so much better than an average NBA player, whereas I'm trying not to go with an extreme example, but is Antonio Brown really that much better than an average NFL receiver? I don't believe he is, And, again, it sounds like sacrilege or something, but he's not. You can plug in somebody else, and that guy's going to give you 95% of what Antonio Brown gives you. Whereas you plug somebody else in for LeBron, you're not getting close to what LeBron gives you. That's the difference between the NBA and the NFL, The NFL has kind of replaceable players. You can plug anybody in, you can slot anybody in. And they're going to give you 95% of what that starter did, if not 99%. You can't in the NBA. It's a talent-based sport, and that's why people are so interested in it. Because when Kyrie Irving gets traded, it's a big deal because talent matters so much. Because, those guys, those Paul Georges, those Chris Pauls that got traded this year, those guys are gold because they're talented, and it matters so much in the NBA between winning and losing. The NBA is talent-based. We know Golden State is the juggernaut. We know Cleveland's probably going to win the East, if not them, probably Boston. We know, this goes back a long way. Michael Jordan won all his titles. The Pit, you know who the good team in the NBA is. And there may be 3 or 4 good teams, but it's talent. Talent matters in the NBA. Kyrie Irving matters. Whereas they're talking about this big defensive holdout in the NFL, Aaron McDonald. I never even heard of him, honestly. He doesn't matter. That's why nobody cares. Again, sacrilege. No, he doesn't. Plug in his backup. The backup's 99% as good as Aaron McDonald. Nobody wants to hear that. That's the truth, He's a replaceable, meaningless cog. In a large extent. That's what every player in the NFL is, a replaceable, meaningless cog. Except maybe at quarterback, and even that's kind of debatable. So that's what the NBA has over all the other sports, is the point of this, is the players matter. They matter because talent matters. If you have Paul George, Chris Paul, going to different teams, it's such a big deal because those are such good players. If you traded a bunch of the best NFL players to one team, you couldn't go. If you put handpicked all the best players of one NFL team, I'd say that still would have less than half of a chance of going to the Super Bowl against just other random teams, Whereas if you put all the best NBA players on one team, it would cruise to the championship, That's the difference between the NFL and the NBA. Talent is real in the NBA. All the other major sports are coin flips to a large extent. And that's fine. That can be fun. We can still, I love watching the NFL. I enjoy the crap out of the NFL. The thing is, if you truly believe the talent doesn't matter thing, it makes the sport meaningless. And that's tough for me. So I try to pretend like talent matters too. I look at my Cowboys. We got a great offensive line. We got Dak Prescott. We got Ezekiel Elliott. We're going to do well. I let myself believe that. even if some part of my rational side knows it's not really true. Because otherwise you can't really enjoy the sport, and I want to enjoy the sport, you know? But the place where it really plays out is the draft. People make such a big deal out of the NFL draft, and I'm just like, none of these players matters, guys. You know, they don't matter. You know, these guys are all just... a good way you can tell is trade value. If you try to trade anybody in the NBA, NFL, they'll fetch like a third-round pick. Nobody cares, you know? There's nobody worth a high draft pick in the NFL. And the high draft picks themselves usually aren't worth anything, is the funny thing. I remember there was this guy online I used to argue with, and he was a big Texans fan, and he thought the Texans could do no wrong, basically, and they drafted Mario Williams, I think, and some linebacker. The point was Mario Williams later went as a free agent to Buffalo, and the point was nothing mattered, you know. He would look at Mario Williams, I think it was the defensive lineman, as this great example of how amazing the Texans draft was and how superior where they were to the... Okay, Mario Williams played a few years and he went to Buffalo and nobody gave a shit, you know. The best players in the NFL, they don't even matter, you know. They just fade away. They get traded for third round picks, you know. They last 3 years and they're done. You know, they're all just cogs that just shuffle in and out. The NBA is not like that, you know, and that's why it's becoming, in my opinion, kind of a growing sport. And has been, you know. And it's true, all the things they say about they don't wear helmets. I agree with that. That's a big thing, and you know, so forth and so on. But a lot of it to me is just that the NBA is the superior sport in some ways. NFL will always be my favorite sport, but in a lot of ways the NBA is the superior sport because it's where talent is real. Talent matters. The players matter. As much as you want to think they matter in the NFL, they don't matter much in the NFL. They really don't. It's hard to accept that. It's hard to admit it, but it's true. You know, I think if you want to get down in the weeds, you can make an argument. Maybe quarterbacks matter in the NFL. You know, it's the one position. That's about it. And you can think to yourself, oh, Gronkowski is such a game changer. No, he's not. You know, when he's out, it doesn't matter. The Patriots win the same, you know, or lose the same. You know, Julio Jones, you know, everyone can see those are good players, but you can still replace Julio Jones with anybody, and he's not affecting the Falcons much. It really is not. And when you talk about Julio Jones, you're talking about the 1% of the 1%, you know. You're using the most extreme example. What about a receiver who's just considered good, you know? I don't know who that would even be, but, you know, just a good receiver. You take him out and replace him with somebody else, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change the team at all, you know. So that's my point of why the NBA is big in the NFL. And the big advantage that people don't really get with the NBA is that talent matters so much. That's why all these player moves are so fascinating in the NBA. If players change in the NFL, people don't care that much. And you know why they don't care that much? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. And they can think it matters, but the facts say different, you know. And so intuitively, they may think, oh, it matters so much what players we got. But intuitively, they know when they see year after year, it not making any difference on whether their team wins or loses. Intuitively, deep down, they know it doesn't really matter. I think it does, but it doesn't, you know. And that's why, if you get a stud defensive player in football, so what? You know, it's not going to change your fortunes. If you get a stud anything in basketball, he is going to change your fortunes, you know. And I guess you could argue that some of it is because there's 11 players in football, but I don't even think it's that. I think that's a little part of it, obviously. Just simple math will tell you that. 11 players on each side of the ball. But I think a bigger part of it is just that the NFL is not really skill-based, you know. You can put anybody in to be your 6'4", 240, 4.5, 40-yard dash linebacker, and he's going to do about as good as the next guy. You know, the difference is not much. They're all cogs. They're all the same in an extent. Just because of the way the game is played and the physical interactions that go on there. And, you know, like I said, so that's the whole point of this video, is that talent matters in the NBA. And that's why, you know, the media and stuff's going so crazy about all these player moves, because those player moves are seismic. Chris Paul and James Harden on the Rockets, that's going to be awesome. I want to see that as much as anybody. Those are amazing moves, because those guys are talented, and it's the one sport where talent matters. It's the one sport where Golden State's the huge favorite. The Patriots were the huge favorite in the NFL. Look at them in Game 1. The NFL's a crapshoot. You're flipping a coin. And NHL and MLB the same. The NBA is the one major North American sport, and I don't know about soccer, but I'm kind of assuming it's the same, because I don't know of a lot of dominance in soccer. NFL, other than individual sports like tennis, where obviously talent's playing a part. But the NFL is even golf. Golf's an individual sport, but it's hard to be dominant in it. But yeah, the NFL, the one difference in the NBA and the other sports, the key thing that it has that people may miss, like I said, is that if LeBron James goes to any team, he makes such a huge difference. If Tom Brady goes to another NFL team, you don't know what the hell to expect. It's a whole new system. You can't separate Tom Brady from the Patriots. You can't separate him from Belichick and that defense and the system that he's in. So if you put Tom Brady on, I don't know, who's the worst team in the NFL? The Jets. Do you think the Jets will go anywhere with their terrible coach? I guarantee you they won't. I guarantee you Tom Brady doesn't move the meter an inch in the Jets. Do we even know if Tom Brady's good, after his week 1? And this is a guy that, if you said, name one NFL player that's great, before Game 1 of this season, you said Tom Brady. Okay, now he looks terrible in Game 1. Now you're like, if you move Tom Brady to the Jets, does he move the needle? Absolutely not. See how much things changed there, and how your preconception of talent doesn't matter, And like I said, we all know if you put Tom Brady in the Jets, it ain't going to do squat, But if you put LeBron James on the, who's the worst team in the NBA? I don't know. But I think there's a big part of coaching in the NBA too, but obviously Popovich and the same guys do well, and I think coaching is a big factor in the NBA. It clearly is. But talent is a bigger one, And like I said, that's so refreshing once you realize it. Because once I realized, I went through stages, it's kind of tough to realize that talent doesn't matter in the NFL. It really kind of saps your interest. Like, all these NFL fans I know, they're all about the draft. And I just can't get into it. And, I don't even talk about it much because people just think you're a crackpot. But it's like, I know that who we draft, the Cowboys, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So what do I care? We drafted some cornerback in the third. So what? I hate to tell people this, but it's the dumbest thing in the world to obsess about the NFL draft. Those players are all the same. They're all going to be out of the league in 2 years, 3 years, 95% of them anyway. And, the ones that aren't, who did the Cowboys draft 5 years ago? I couldn't tell you, Nobody cares anymore. So, yeah, that's why the NBA, the big factor in the NBA that people don't talk about is talent matters. Talent is real in the NBA. It's not so much in the other sports.